This is the third workshop of our series of 4, focused on the Community Wildfire Prevention Grant funded by Measure T, administered by the wonderful team here at Truckee Fire under the Wildfire Prevention Division. So today, again, with the meeting etiquette, let's just stay muted, keep the camera off, put your questions in the chat. Maria's here, and she will be helping me with questions. Thank you, Maria. So today we're going to talk about how to be competitive. This is going to be a shorter workshop probably than the other 2. We've got kind of 4 main things to focus on today. And, really, these are things that we cover pretty in depth when if you schedule a consultation with me. This seems to be the things that we focus in on quite a bit. So I'll go through them. Again, I'm always here as a resource if you need any, additional help or guidance on how to work through this process. Another high-level summary of the grant program. Again, this program's for the community. It's built for the community. It's meant to fund community projects that provide community-level benefits. And these are projects within the fire district. They are meant to be collaborative in nature. And I am here to help you think about your ideas and how they fit this program, not to design your project for you. We've mentioned this a few times. If you are thinking that there are other ways that Measure T can support your community through existing services or services that you think your community needs, please come talk to us and let's see what we can do. And remember that there is quite a bit of effort required to get through this application process. We're going to dive right into it with the landscape level context and project benefits. And we're really excited about this this year. We've spent a lot of time developing quite a few resources over the last few years since the inception of Measure T to really help support the community with some of these ideas and these landscape level contexts. And so we have a wonderful community wildfire protection plan with a story map, and we have a newly launched tracker dashboard. And all of these resources are really meant for the community. So let's take a look at what we have going on. So we have a landing site for our CWPP. It's on our website at truckeefire.org. And this is the landing site, and we have designed this to be very public facing and transparent. And we have a couple different options for people to kind of explore what's in this plan. We do recommend that everyone in our community should be reading this plan and being informed on what is in the community wildfire protection plan and what we're trying to prioritize and move projects forward with the idea of, again, community protection. So we have a few things for you all. If you go to this hub site, there's a story map. And if you click on this link here, it'll get you into a pretty neat, basically high-level summary of the CWPP. The document itself is quite large, but this is kind of a summarization in a fun, interactive way for the community. And so when we're talking about landscape-level benefits, landscape-level context, we really want to look at a few maps that we have available for you all, and that lives under the mitigation strategies tab in this story map. So if you go to mitigation strategies and you scroll down, there's a pretty interactive map here, and you can expand this. And this map has a lot of information on it. But when we're talking about the context, we want to kind of understand if we scroll this slider to the right, we have quite a bit of data available, and this is updated regularly. And this data here is really showing you planned projects in purple, like ongoing or mid-implementation projects in orange, and completed projects in green. And so when we're designing our projects, let's take, for example, a project we funded last year, the Tundra PUD Partnership Project in orange here. This is an opportunity for you to articulate the landscape, level context here. What is proximate to your project? Do you have areas near you that have been treated previously, like this green area to the north? Do you have projects proximate to you that are planned for treatment, like this hashed area to the south? These are things that we should be thinking about in the context of our projects for competitiveness, right? We want landscape level features. We can't get that all done at one time, but we really want to try to connect the dots, if you will, and bring these areas into kind of a contiguous state of treatment. And so this project was very competitive because it's right smack dab in the middle of an area that we haven't treated yet on private property. And so this looks really good to a review team and the review committee, because they are seeing that this is kind of an extension of work that has already been occurring or is planned. So use this map and find some areas or where you're proposing your projects and see what is planned, proposed, or ongoing, and talk about that in your application. You can click on these polygons and you see what the acreages are. You can see what the project name is, Armstrong Tract Hampton. And so there's a lot of information here for the community to help you think about this landscape level context and what you have proximate to you in your project, in your community. Another nice resource or something to think about are like what services or amenities are near your project. And we don't really have that data on this, but I think we're all pretty familiar with Google Maps, and we are familiar with our communities and where recreational areas or amenities may be located. And you should also talk about that in your application. Another resource we have that's a little bit more high level. This is more focused on forest and fuel management projects, but we have a CWPP project tracker that really is tracking various different projects, not just forest fuels reduction. So we have 3 buckets of, categories of projects, resilient landscapes, which is those forest management projects, fire adapted communities, which includes, home hardening, defensible space, green waste, and then wildfire response projects. And you can scroll into this map, zoom it up, and you can click on these and see what these projects are. This was an evacuation route treatment. This is we did some stewardship days for defensible space. So there's lots of information on this map in terms of what projects are near you, what type of project are they. And so we really hope that the community really digs into these resources and uses them to their advantage, especially in the context of the Community Wildfire Prevention Grant. This is what the review team and the review committee is going to pull up when we're sitting down and looking at these projects. They are looking at these maps and figuring out where your project is in relation to all of the other work that is planned, completed, or ongoing. Again, we dive into that pretty deep in consultation with me if you do set that up, and I'm happy to help you out more with thinking about this kind of landscape level context with your projects. The other thing in this prompt in the application is thinking about project benefits. So you should consider both direct and potential indirect benefits, also known as co-benefits, that your project may have. I think you really need to be realistic here and think about how your project supports community wildfire resiliency, the environment, and public health. So there's a delineation between direct and indirect benefits. Direct benefits are more immediate, obvious advantages from an activity, and they're directly linked to specific actions or outcomes. So they're tangible, right? So an example of a direct benefit may be job creation through the implementation of this work. A direct benefit might be, income from selling forest products. So there's direct benefits. They're very specific to your project and what you're proposing. And so think about those obvious advantages from an activity and kind of break those up from like the direct benefits and maybe the more aspirational indirect benefits. So kind of more the broader long-term effects of an activity. So indirect benefits could be something like improved resilience to climate change, right? Like I think we're all working towards that with this type of forest management projects. Obviously that's not going to be an immediate benefit, but it is something that I believe is a great co-benefit or indirect benefit. Another indirect benefit might be increased opportunities for education or cultural preservation, strengthening community relationships by working together on these types of projects, right? So list those because this is worth 5 points total, and this is the evaluation criteria. And so what we've been talking about is how you go about a process to understanding if your project is part of a larger plan or coordinated effort, or is proximate to essential community services, recreational amenities, etc., and how the project supports, and provides community level benefits. We will award additional points if you can clearly articulate how the project delivers enduring and sustainable benefits. And this is important to spend some time on. Vulnerable and priority populations. This is sometimes takes a lot more effort to address vulnerable populations. So California defines vulnerable populations as groups that face higher risks due to socioeconomic factors, health conditions, exposure to environmental hazards, or wildfire. So in Truckee, our minority populations are typically non-English speaking households, communities with larger populations of ages 65 and older, people with disabilities, single parent and single income households. If your project will target these populations, you should be articulating kind of the direct benefits, not so much kind of aspirational indirect benefits. And I would implore you to be realistic and don't try to make something up. If your project's not really having a direct benefit to vulnerable populations, then that's you need to state that, or you need to be realistic with your answer here. I would say that these populations require more targeted support and interventions to ensure that they're informed and protected, particularly in the face of kind of wildfire hazards. And so designing a project to address a specific need for a vulnerable population, I think in my experience takes more time, coordination, and thought to really design a project that is meaningful for that population. I think that we can all justify that our projects are, having some of these indirect effects or indirect benefits to some of these populations. We always try to justify that by, reducing wildfire hazards and reducing wildfire intensity and severity. We're trying to reduce potential smoke impacts to receptive populations that are maybe, have asthma or, respond negatively. But I think about this in the context of like, if a wildfire happens, what populations are going to have a really hard time recovering from such a disturbance? And if you need more assistance thinking about this, I think we have a couple potential applicants that are working on specific projects directed at some Latino communities in Truckee. And so let's talk through these things if those ideas resonate with you. This is worth some points, and it mostly to prioritize these types of projects that really do provide benefits to these priority populations. So projects that clearly demonstrate a direct and meaningful benefit, will be prioritized and awarded additional points. And you need to be clear and realistic with that answer to that prompt in the application. Moving forward to grantees' administrative capacity and past forest management history. Not all applicants to this program are going to have experience with writing grants and managing this type of work, and that's totally okay. We really tried to design this program to meet our community where it's at and not make it that you have to be a high-level professional and grant writer and have a bunch of experience with forest management projects to apply. Like that's not the spirit of this grant opportunity. We want to make this available to our community members and coach you through this process. So when you're answering this prompt in the application, if you don't write grants in your professional capacity, think about your professional experience and your work that you've committed to in whatever professional field that you work in, and how that might relate to managing a grant project, and most importantly, kind of responsibly spending public funds. So do you have accounting experience with some organization or contract administration, any kind of project management experience? These are things that you should be talking about to give the review committee some clarity on your specific qualifications. Do you have any certificates or qualifications that are pertinent to managing a grant and spending public funding? We covered this in the first webinar, but grantees, you must have the ability to plan, administer, and complete the grant project. And these projects are intended to be managed and implemented by the applicant or a professional third party, such as a registered professional forester. And these projects are not meant to be managed by Truckee Fire. And so this is reason number one, really, that we want private landowners to hire professional foresters, because while these concepts we've been talking about, may be complicated to the layperson or someone that doesn't do this every day, this is bread and butter for a forester. This is stuff we do all the time, and that's why we want private property owners to be working with foresters, so that you have the support you need to get through this process. If you don't have a lot of experience with accounting, contract administration, project management, maybe you should be looking in your community to people that do, or work with your HOA or another third party to work on a grant application and have that support you need. Really, this is demonstrated in the typical grant world by basically like listing successfully administered projects that you have completed basically in the last 5 years. And that's easy for someone like me at Truckee Fire. I have a resume of projects and grants that I have written and executed. And when we apply to state project or state grant opportunities, we have a pretty big list to demonstrate our administrative capacity. And so if you are a nonprofit or if you're working with a forester, list out what that forester has completed or projects they've worked on. Projects you've worked on that are relatable. It doesn't need to be specific to the exact project idea that you're proposing, but relatable to managing public funds. It is worth 5 points. And if you have limited or no experience, again, you should consider partnering with a more experienced organization or individual that can help manage your project. We very specifically break out like the applicant and the project manager for a reason. The applicant can be any party. A project manager should be someone that has a little bit more experience working through these processes. The project manager is responsible for invoicing, reporting, and kind of general oversight of the project activities. Kind of moving into local and regional plans and assessments compatibility. this really is right back to the Truckee CWPP and tracker dashboard. So again, I recommend you read the document. And then for this section in the application, you should be thinking about how your project is consistent with the Truckee CWPP. And the way we do that is referring to the matrix tables in the actual document. So let's look at those real quick and talk through that. So we have three tables that we call, these matrix tables that are calling out, basically goals and objectives of the CWPP specific to resilient landscapes, fire adapted communities, and wildfire response. And so you want to look at these matrix tables and figure out where your project fits into this. Are you, landscape level forest management, fuels reduction? Are you, multi-jurisdictional collaborative forest management? We're using the CWPP to, prioritize our projects and also demonstrate the compatibility. So are you compatible with one of these project ID numbers? Are you doing fuel treatments, technical support? Are you developing prescribed burn associations, stuff like that? There's more tables that might be more specific or relatable to your project. So fire adapted communities, we're talking about FireWise home hardening measures, neighborhood communication, community technical assistance, workforce capacity. Are you putting together media campaigns? Are you advancing any one of these project ID numbers? There's a lot of them. So read through these and figure out where your project is consistent with some of these project ID numbers and list those in the prompt. We have another table for wildfire response, which includes fuel treatments along evacuation routes, communication tools, expanding early fire detection systems, educating residents, stuff like that. So dig into these matrix tables and justify your project and make it more competitive by designing it around some of these actions that we have called out in our community wildfire protection plan for advancing these concepts. There are other plans out there. For FireWise communities, you have action plans that you may want to move forward with a grant project to advance some kind of strategy in that action plan. There are other plans, but really this local and regional plans. This is very specific to the Truckee CWPP since these projects are all funded within our district. So you should be referring to our community plan, and really you should read that document and be informed on what's in there. This is worth 5 points again. I'm not going to read that. Again, the evaluation criteria is very clearly listed in the procedural guide, which you should have already read at this point. I told you this was going to be a short one. That's really all I have. As I said, we work through this through the consultation, and I get a lot of questions about it, just phone calls and how do I access the CWPP? What should I say? I'm happy to direct you in a consultation as to how your project may be consistent with the CWPP and landscape level concepts. If you haven't already, you should read the CWPP. It's a great resource. It's one of the leading community wildfire protection plans in the country. A lot of people are looking at it as a great example on how to develop a meaningful plan for the community. It really is prepared for the community. Prompts specific to what we discussed today are asked in the online application. And so you need to spend time on this, complete the prompts thoughtfully, and always try to maximize your points. And of course, schedule a consultation with me at any time, and we can cover these concepts in more depth. I've mentioned this a couple times. There are other programs to consider. Nevada County OES microgrant program, they just launched their website, and it looks like they are looking to fund up to 59 $20,000 projects. Like you can see that they are looking for eligible applicants from Firewise communities, road associations, HOAs, local agencies, schools, and nonprofits, and they're looking to abate hazardous vegetation along private roads in Nevada County. So if you are thinking about a roadside project, you should probably be considering this program as well, knowing that our program is very competitive. And this might be a better opportunity to at least get some funding moving for your community for what we would consider critical projects on roadsides and evacuation routes. So I would implore all of you to very seriously consider this project if you are thinking about roadside work or this funding opportunity, excuse me. Of course, we've mentioned before, there's the state California Forest Improvement Program and a federal program as well that is similar. These are cost share programs. If you have questions about these, reach out to me. I can get you going in the right direction. These are great programs to consider. We do have one more workshop coming up on April 3rd, and we'll talk about submitting your application and maps. We do also offer office hours that are listed here. I'm just signed in for an hour every day, and you can come in at any time and ask any questions that you might have. We do have lots of resources on our website. You can always contact me or Eric. And with that, I will move into a question and answer period if there are any.
There are no outstanding questions in the chat at the moment.
Okay, well, seeing no more questions, thanks for attending today. It was a short one, but again, we do cover this pretty in depth in consultations. So if you need any assistance or anything, please reach out and we'll get you taken care of. And thanks for attending, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.